You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast, where it's all about education, support, and coaching for adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Zena, a late diagnosed ADHDer, here to help you unpack the challenges, frustrations, and the positive side of living with ADHD. With my no BS approach, I'll help you to better understand your unique ADHD brain and how you can work with it to feel better, increase your self-confidence, improve your relationships, and ultimately achieve your goals. Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to the podcast. All right, we just need to take a deep breath together. This episode, can I tell you a secret? I'm just gonna be really honest. This has been one hell of an episode because I have been, let's say, working on this episode in the background. I'm often working on multiple episodes at the same time, just jotting down ideas and, ahas and, things I see with clients, with myself, etc. So I've had this one in the works for probably 6 weeks, and I thought it would be out well before now. And the very reason it's not out, the reason you're listening to it now and not weeks ago, is because of a sneaky form of perfectionism that I was not aware of. And I think that's very ironic given today's topic is perfectionism. Also, before I decided to hit record, I was reflecting on another episode I created. So a while back, I recorded an episode on burnout and I hadn't yet published it. So it's actually loaded up. It was ready to go a while ago, and then I just kept kind of pushing it out, and I haven't published it. And I decided in my brain, I was like, I'm just going to re-record that because I don't actually think it's quite right. I think it's a little overcomplicated. I think I could simplify it. I think I just want to make it a better episode, basically, in my head. All of that was me trying to perfect it. And it's so fascinating as I go to record this, how I can now see that. And it's going to come out right after this one. You can hold me to it. Next week's episode, my friends, is going to be about burnout, ADHD and burnout. That's it. And I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to put it out in the world. All right. Before I got my ADHD diagnosis, I did not think I was a perfectionist at all, because in my mind, perfection was somebody who had that beautiful home with, everything was in its place and it was pristine and always clean and always tidy, nothing out of place. And it was somebody who, did things on time or early, handed in projects early. They were definitely not the sort of person like me who could stay up late the night before or work like a crazy person before the deadline. They were the sort of person who dressed perfectly and looked perfect all of the time, hair and makeup, all the things. That was perfection to me. It was like Barbie, right? The image that comes to my brain when I think of perfect is Barbie, okay? It was certainly not somebody like me who almost never folds washing, has junk drawers, or I have a junk wardrobe that I'm too scared to open. Somebody like me who wears mismatched outfits and hates to wash her hair. But it turns out I actually do have a lot of perfectionist tendencies, and so do a lot of our ADHD community, especially us women. So, like I said, when I started to work on this episode, I was thinking things like, I don't think it's quite right, and I need to do a little bit more research, and I don't feel like it's good enough yet. I was trying to get it right. I was always thinking I needed to learn more or do more or get more for the episode, right? Any form of not enough yet or it'll be good enough when. All of that, right, is sneaky little perfection suckers. I call them suckers because they can quite literally suck the life out of us if we're not careful. Okay? One of my telltale signs is that I want to get it right. Something about it's not right. Right. That is such a tell for me. All right? Or it's not quite good enough, right? Or I need to learn more, get more information. Like that's often a tell for me too. So recently, I went and watched a couple of our boys do athletics day at their college, at their school. And they started on the high jump. Well, one of them rather, he started on the high jump. And they had this bar on the high jump set at this ridiculous height. And I was looking at it and I'm thinking, geez, I could not jump that, even as an adult, let alone as a kid. And what happened is the kids started going over, running towards this high jump, and like 70% of the kids got knocked out on the first go because this bar on this high jump was set ridiculously high. And that's what perfectionism is. Perfectionism is the bar we set for ourselves. It's miles too high. And then we beat ourselves up when we can't jump over it for not achieving the things. Throughout most of my life, I was constantly aware of what was wrong with me and beating myself up for it. That is perfectionism. I would set unrealistic goals and I would make these unrealistic lists and then beat myself up for not achieving them. Always thinking that things should be better, that I should be better. I could have done better on that test if I just put in more effort to studying instead of procrastinating, right? My home should look nicer. I should have more pictures on the walls. I should have this nicer dinner set for when people come over. I need to send that email, but I just need to sit on it a while longer. I need to think about what I want to say because I don't want to upset anyone. Perfectionism is constantly thinking that things could always be better. Isn't that sneaky? Brene Brown, I have talked about her many times on the podcast. I love her work. I highly recommend all of her books. And she talks about perfectionism. She says, perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of blame, judgment, and shame. My friends, doesn't that just resonate? Especially when we know that emotional dysregulation and experiencing rejection and criticism in our RSD, those are large parts of ADHD that we often struggle with, that can have a huge impact on our life. So if we don't know how to feel and process our emotions, if that is something we struggle with, and if we are, super sensitive to feeling criticized and being rejected and all of those things, it makes sense that we want to do things perfectly and try to perfect our lives and ourselves to minimize that or avoid it. So let's think about where our perfectionism comes from. So we try to perfect things because of so much of the shame and criticism that we experienced growing up, okay? I remember asking the school secretary, she came into my classroom and we were all working, and I went up to ask her a question. And she lost her shit in the middle of this classroom. It went completely silent. All of my fellow students were looking at me and she's yelling at me. And then she goes out and slams the door and I'm just left standing there for asking her this question. And I felt so attacked, criticized, humiliated. It was horrific. I must have been 9 years old or something. It was awful. I felt so much shame. I have never forgotten that moment. I have this very vivid picture in my head of it because of the intense emotions that were surrounding it. So of course, I never ever wanted to experience that again. I never wanted to feel like that. So it makes so much sense that I would want to perfect things and, try to get things, air quotes, right so that I could avoid that. I'm sure you have so many memories from your childhood where, you were shamed for some version of, air quotes, not being good enough. I remember this other time with my dad, and he had a friend over, and my dad had made this comment about the beer that his friend drank and how it was like a really weak beer. And my dad said to me, can you go and get one of his beers? His mate was there, and he's like, can you please get, both of us a beer? And so I grabbed them out of the fridge, and as I handed my dad's friend his beer, I said, oh, this is the weak beer, the really weak beer. And my dad was like, oh my God, why would you say that? And he like nutted off at me, and I felt so ashamed. Like I was just repeating something I'd heard my dad say, and I didn't know that it was not appropriate to say that. I thought it was going to be funny, and I didn't understand. And so I felt so small and tiny and ashamed and awful inside, and I was desperate for my dad's approval, right? So of course, after that experience, I just wanted to say or do the right thing all of the time because I never wanted to feel like that again. Trying to make things good enough, trying to make ourselves or our homes or our work good enough to try and avoid feeling that shame and that judgment that we've experienced, right? We try to perfect things or do things to avoid feeling those emotions. So it might be, an assignment that we've got to do, or report cards that we've got to write for students at our school, or it could be deciding on our business name, or setting up a website, or writing a blog post, or recording a podcast, right? Perfectionism shows up so sneaky in lots of different areas of our life, from our bodies, to the way we look, to what we eat, to what we dress in, to our work, our relationships, our home, all the things. And the shame that we have experienced throughout our childhood and those big intense feelings are a large part of why we've grown into perfectionists as adults. And many of us have also used perfectionism as a way to try and mask our ADHD, as a way to try and minimize or hide our differences. Because standing out or not being, air quotes, good enough would likely open us up to, being judged or criticized and then feeling awful about ourselves. Right? All or nothing thinking is another little perfectionist tell. It's either good or bad. It's either awesome or it's awful. It's either perfect or it's shit. Like there's no grey, there's no middle there. Now, for women, a lot of our perfectionism is also rooted in the socialization that we have received about, what a happy and successful woman should look and act like. So to put this in perspective, have you ever heard a man say, I'm a recovering perfectionist? Like, I certainly have not. Like, men are literally celebrated for creating imperfections and imperfect work in the world, right? And yet I hear so many women who will say, I'm a recovering perfectionist, or I'm aware that sometimes I'll try and, perfect, and I shouldn't do that. Like we're hyper aware of that, right? And sometimes, like me, you may not even know that you're a perfectionist. Might be sneaky. Women have received a lot of messages 24/7 about how to be less. I heard this the other day and I don't know who to attribute it to, but it was beautiful. And she said, we have received messages about how to be less, how to weigh less, how to do less, how to be less dramatic, less emotional, less bossy, how to people please less, right? And that's what perfectionism is. It's telling you to stop being your full self, right? So I'm in the middle right now of creating a course, and perfectionism is showing up for me loudly. And it's telling me that this part's not good enough, or, this workbook that you're creating, it's not quite right. And, this slide right here that you've got, like, you need to learn more, or you need to go look at what other people are doing to try and get it right or do it better. What? My perfectionism was literally telling me, hey, what you've created here is not good enough, so go look at what other people are doing, or, you should go check with somebody else because they'll know better than you. Like, that is what my perfectionism was telling me. It was fueling insecurity and self-doubt. Perfectionism tells you not to trust yourself. It literally encourages you to edit or alter or dilute yourself. All because we are afraid of feeling bad. We are afraid of somebody else judging us. So we go to great lengths to try and avoid it. I got to tell you though, my friends, when I discovered this, when I caught myself doing this and I heard my brain doing these things, I was like, ooh, yeah. Like, I was so proud of myself because I was able to coach myself through it. And I asked myself the question, will what I've already created here, will this make a difference? And the answer to me was so obvious. Yes, it will. 100% it will. And that was it. That was all I needed. So I'm just celebrating my huge win with you all. Because you know what? Perfectionism shows up for me in so many sneaky ways. And this is so much of my work with myself right now. So, what is the harm in trying to perfect things? I think we should talk about that. Because often people will be like, yeah, it's no harm, or it's not that big of a thing. When in actual fact, it kind of is infecting our entire life. So let's talk about it. Perfectionism tells us to constantly judge ourselves. And the more that we judge ourselves, the more we end up judging others. Okay? So perfection tells us that we should compare ourselves to other people, and it tells us that they've got it better than we do. And it feeds on this narrative that we aren't good enough. Perfection leads to a lot of pessimism, okay? A lot of negative thinking, a lot of negative emotions, which ironically is what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid feeling bad, but perfection leads to feeling worse. Okay? And it leads to pessimism because we never get to perfection. We never arrive at this mystical destination that doesn't exist. What I've noticed in myself, and I see this with my clients, is it can produce controlling behavior, trying to control other people, or trying to obsessively control yourself. And when I reflect back on my childhood and my, adolescence, etc., and I had an eating disorder, I think I developed, I want to say around, 17, 18, something like that. And that was about trying to control, what my body looked like. And, I was obsessed with trying to perfect my weight and my body and how I looked. Isn't that fascinating? Perfectionism also fuels jealousy and envy. Other people are happier because they've got it all together, or they've figured it out, or they've got this and they've got that. Like, they're perfect. At the end of the day, my friends, it produces nothing awesome. Perfectionism is not supporting us in the lives that we ultimately want to live, although it will tell us that it is. It's so sneaky like that. And that's the thing is, at the end of it, perfectionism is our brain trying to keep us safe, okay? It's well-meaning, right? Telling us that, hey, if you're perfect, you won't be rejected and you won't have to feel bad. But here's the thing, my friends. Perfectionism produces nothing good. It is based on a lie. Nobody is perfect. Nothing is perfect. Nothing. It's all completely subjective, up for interpretation. Like, everybody has a different opinion. And the reality is that your brain is never, ever going to tell you that you have arrived, you're perfect, everything is perfect. Never, ever. And that's because perfectionism isn't real. It's not self-improvement, okay? I want you to hear this. Perfectionism is not self-improvement. It is self-destruction. So Brené Brown, I'm going to read a little excerpt from one of her books. At its core, it's about trying to earn approval. Most perfectionists grew up being praised for achievements and performance. Somewhere along the way, they adopted the belief, I am what I accomplish and how well I accomplish it. Please perform, perfect. Damn, when I read that, I was like, oh shit, she was speaking to me. Because that's the thing. So many of us, we've grown up, and our parents have praised us for the grades and how well we've done at school, or, with our instruments and our sports practices and our games. Like, we've been praised for all of that. And we've had bosses that have praised us for, getting good customer feedback or a good outcome or what have you, like following rules. We get praised for that. People pleasing, the way we look and our appearance, what we dress in, how we, show up to work looking tidy and clean, and we're praised for all of that. So it makes sense, right? Please perform perfect. And it's so rooted in what everybody else is thinking of us, not what we're necessarily thinking of ourselves. It's so much about external validation, right? So I want to give you some questions to consider. Are you attaching your worthiness to your productivity and how much you get done? Are you attaching your good enoughness to the feedback that you get from others, perhaps from your boss or a grade that you might get from an assignment you've handed in? Do you make these things mean that you're either good enough or you're not? When I say worthiness, I mean that feeling of being good enough, that feeling of being, worthy of love and belonging, right? Your lovability, your worthiness. Are you attaching your worthiness to how something looks or how somebody else responds to it? Perhaps that's your, performance at work, or how well your kids behave, or how your home looks when people come over. Are you putting conditions on your self-worth? My friend, are you hustling for your worthiness? I used to think that I needed to be busy all the time and that I just liked to feel productive. But in actual fact, I had attached my self-worth to being productive and getting things done. To, working all the time at home and not being able to sit down, sit still, thinking I needed to earn my rest. Sometimes we think we need to work all the time in order to feel worthy. And hustling for our worthiness at its core is perfectionism. Thinking if we get this perfect, then we'll never have to experience that judgment or shame or feeling bad. And here's the thing, our imperfections are not inadequacies. I'm going to say that again. Our imperfections are not inadequacies. They are reminders that we are all in this together, that we are all human. Here's what I know, my friends. You cannot perfect your way out of feeling negative emotions. You cannot perfect yourself and your life and your work and all the things to a point where you will never experience shame and judgment and criticism and blame. You cannot perfect your way into living a authentic, full, meaningful life. The solution is to accept imperfections and to accept your inherent value as a human. And the solution is to be your authentic, imperfect self in the world. So let's talk through some of these, okay? When we talk about accepting your imperfections, being authentic and accepting your value as a human as just fixed in what it is, I want to start with, when we talk about accepting imperfection, I want you to think about, if you've got kids, you can think about kids, but I'm going to think about pets because I got 2 cats who are by no means perfect. But if you think about pets, right, whether it's a pet you have now or a pet that you had in the past, okay, pets are not perfect and we love them exactly the way we are. Okay. I love my cat even when he vomits on the carpet, even when he fights with his brother, and we then have to take him to the vet and pay for a vet bill. I love my cat even when the other day he got shut in the garage and he peed in the garage because unfortunately he was shut in there, and now our garage smells like cat's pee, which is a horrible smell, right? But it doesn't impact his lovability to me. It doesn't change how valuable of a fluffy, beautiful cat he is. It doesn't impact that at all, right? When my cat is fighting with the neighbor's dog, when he doesn't come in when I call him and he comes in soaking wet. He did that yesterday. He came in absolutely soaking wet and came straight up to me for cuddles, and I got very wet. Right? All of those things, they're imperfect, right? If you've ever owned a cat, you know just how they do their own thing. Like when you want them to cuddle you, they're like, no, I don't want to cuddle you. Right? Cats are such a beautiful example of like imperfect creatures that are just great the way they are, right? I love my cats, even for all of their imperfections, right? Think about the people in your life who you love and care about, right? Like I think about my partner. I think about like the 3 boys that we have. I think about like my closest friends. I think about them and I think, none of them are perfect. And I love them. I love them all. Right? Like I think about, mistakes that I'll think of, my best friend comes to mind, and I think about some of the mistakes that she has made, some of the like misunderstandings that her and I have had together. Right? And I love her. She's by no means perfect. It's her imperfections that make her so awesome. And it's her imperfections that make me feel human and normal and enjoy being around her. Right? We don't love other people because they're perfect. We love them for who they are. And the same is true for you. Right? People love you for who you are, not because you're perfect. Right? They love you for who you are. Life is perfect because of its imperfections. When I think about travel, I travel to foreign countries to experience different things. And, it's always imperfect and it's incredible. And nobody would agree on like the one best place in the world to live that they would say is perfect, because we all appreciate and value different things. When we talk about your inherent value as a human, what if you just get to feel good about yourself for doing nothing? What if you just get to enjoy being yourself for who you are? What if you just get to feel valuable and worthy for the fact that you are you? You're a human. What if you just get to feel good about yourself because you exist on the planet? What if no amount of money, no amount of praise, and no amount of whatever it is that you're hustling to get will ever affect your self-worth or your value as a human, because those things are fixed. They just are. What makes you a valuable human? What makes somebody worthy or good enough? Right? The reality is that we were all just born that way. I'll often give this example, and I've shared it here on the podcast, that, when we're born into the world, a baby is born, okay? And if you've got a child, imagine your child is born into the world. The moment they enter the world, they're good enough, they're valuable, they are worthy of love. That's it, right? That is the criteria. Being a human. That's it. As soon as you're here on the planet, you made it, you've done it, you've achieved it, tick the box, right? And you can't negotiate it. It just is, right? Your good enough status is not negotiable. It just is, okay? That is the truth. We don't get, a baby's not born into the world and the doctor looks at it and goes, oh, yep, that one's good enough. Oh, this one, no, definitely not good enough. Put it in that pile. Like, that just doesn't happen. Every single one of us born into the planet, we are just born. Human, good enough. There you go. Box ticked. Okay? The point I'm trying to make is your good enough status is just not negotiable. Okay. Often I need to spend a bit of time with people and helping them understand that. And we come at that from a few different angles in coaching. But my friend, you're imperfect. We all are. And it's our imperfections that make this world a beautiful place. It's our differences. Imagine if we were all the same. How fucking boring would that be? So boring, right? So boring. All right. Want to be happy? Stop trying to be perfect and instead embrace who you are, flaws and all. All right, my friend, go out and have an imperfect week. Huge love. I'll speak to you soon. If you are loving what you're learning here on the podcast, but you still feel like your ADHD is holding you back, I can help. Using evidence-based coaching tools and my own experiences, I'll help you to manage your emotions and feel better, to increase your productivity, grow your self-confidence, and create the life that you were meant for. Visit zenajones.com/thrive and schedule an ADHD support session to get started.